Hi, and welcome to another episode of Start the Week with Wisdom. I'm Bridget Burns, Executive Director of the University Innovation Alliance.
And I'm Doug Lederman, editor and co-founder of Inside Higher Ed.
Each week, I partner with a journalist, typically Doug, to have a conversation with a sitting college president or chancellor to unpack what it's like to live in this moment and to lead, and hopefully to distill a sense of wisdom and optimism for your week ahead. So that's why we call it Start the Week with Wisdom. Doug, you are muted, but I'm sure what you're saying is wonderful.
It is. It was. That's perfect. Today we're joined by Kristina Johnson, who's the president of Ohio State University, the 16th president, and she came to Ohio State last year, having spent some previous years as chancellor of the State University of New York. Also worked in corporate and government sectors as well, and really well-rounded leader. Welcome, Dr. Johnson.
Thank you very much, Doug and Bridget. It's a pleasure to be here.
Very excited to have you on. So how are you holding up right now? I know that it's right this part of the term, you all have started classes, and I'm sure it's a whirlwind at the moment.
It is. It's going well, and it's so great to be back in person. I tell you, walking along the Oval at The Ohio State University and just seeing all the students, and they're smiling. We require masks indoors, but not outdoors, so I actually can see them, and it's really terrific.
Oh, don't tempt me. You're dangling it out in front of me for those of us who are remote and basically like stuck in boxes. So I'm super jealous, and it sounds lovely. I wanted to first start by asking you to share a little bit about yourself, because while you are definitely not new to leadership or to higher education, to The Ohio State University as the president, you are. So I wanted to just see if you could share a little bit about your background, or perhaps a story or something that would give us a sense about who you are and how you kind of view leadership.
Well, a little bit about my background. Actually, some of my ancestors came from Ohio. My grandfather actually went to Ohio State, played on the 1896 football team. So Ohio State's been a storied institution in our family and in my history. I grew up in Colorado, and I grew up during the sort of pre-Title IX era. So when I ended up going to Stanford in the 70s, I think one of the things that I recognized was that there really weren't the sporting opportunities either in my high school or in my college for women that there were with men. And the reason why that plays into my the way I look at leadership is I really look at leadership as a player coach. So we didn't have a lacrosse team at Stanford. So I founded it, got all the kids together, mostly from the East Coast, sometimes from the Midwest. And I said, look, let's play. Let's start this sport on this coast. And so I would take the draw. I was center, but I was also the coach. And so I think that's the way I approach leadership, is you have to do the little things and the big things well. And sometimes that means, mostly at this level, it's coaching, but sometimes it means you have to be a player too.
I love that. I was trying to type that up. It's good advice.
To talk to us a little bit about changing leadership or taking on a different leadership role in the last year, when our whole world turned upside down, and entering a new institution, even if it had family history to you, and sort of taking the reins, and especially a place as large and sprawling as Ohio State. How did you? Because we've heard lots of people talk about sort of entering a new organization, onboarding in these times.
Well, onboarding was challenging, I have to say, because one of the first things I did when I came in, actually a month before I started, was I assessed our return to campus plan. And one of the things, we made some changes. One of them was to limit gatherings to less than 10. So part of onboarding is meet as many people as you can, everywhere they are, as often as you can, just to build that trust and that connection. So that was pretty challenging when you can't have meetings more than 10. And but we're still having small meetings, there'd be 2 or 4. A a lot remotely. So we actually learned what we learned. We used what we learned in higher ed, which is some of our large lecture classes we do online, where you can accommodate a lot of people, trying to get the classes in person to be smaller than 20, smaller than 10 in the case of COVID, so that we can actually have that interpersonal relationship. That was kind of the approach we had to take to onboarding. And then Franklin County, which is where the Ohio State University is located, went purple in November, and that pretty much shut down all activities. And in fact, the mayor said we didn't want anybody to travel around Thanksgiving and the holidays, because we didn't want people then to come back and bring back, take COVID to the communities in which they live, or to bring it back. So like many universities around the country, we were open. And then after Thanksgiving, we didn't bring the students back, but had them, take their classes and assignments remotely. And then returning, we added another couple layers of improvement, which is to have everybody test before they come, and then test again after they got here, which meant that we pretty much sustained for the spring semester less than 0.5% positivity rate. And we were able to stay open. We were able to get back to athletics and our sports, our in-person music performances, and do a lot of things that we couldn't before. Again, trying to keep less than, at that time, I think we increased it to 20. So I think onboarding was challenging, without a doubt, trying to establish that trust and build a team. So building a team is very hard. We all weren't together until I think it was in late May. We started to have in-person meetings the Monday after graduation. So that was tough, without a doubt.
Did it change? I'm curious, did it change how you led from previous times? Or were there things you had to do differently? Physically, obviously, but were there new approaches about how you connected with people or tried to lead?
Yeah, I think that what it was for me, I came in every day. I think there were only like 2 or 3 days when someone in my office was exposed to someone who was COVID positive. So we quarantined until we found out that we actually weren't exposed. So I came in every day. And again, I would choose opportunities. I'd still walk around the Oval. It was just pretty empty. I'd go to the student union fully masked, say hello to the students that were there. It was really trying to be as visible as possible 24/7, just because, again, you couldn't have the large gatherings that would facilitate more of that kind of connection. So I did a lot of videos. I would every day record 2 or 3 videos. And I think that was a little different as well.
Totally understand that. So as you're walking around the Oval, and I think now that you're back on campus, I'm wondering if you can give a sense for folks at home about what you're seeing or hearing is coming from students. It sounds like everybody's kind of happy to be back in person because they've been tired of Zoom land. But I'm sure there might be other perspectives that you're hearing as a leader that you're trying to adapt to.
Yeah, well, for sure, being able to just meet students, walk up to a group of students, talk to them about what they're experiencing. I think mostly for our new students that are coming in, they had their high school year, probably in part remote, maybe some in person. So they haven't really seen a difference per se, because we're pretty much back to almost normal, or the new normal. But imagine you're a sophomore or a junior, particularly a sophomore, you've never experienced it. So what I hear a lot from our sophomores is that I'm going to college. This is my first year for the second time. And that's definitely the way that Veronica and I feel about our experience at the Ohio State University, is it's our second year for the first time. I think they're super excited to get back to the research opportunities. We have what's called a second semester, sort of second year transformation experience program, or STEP. And that's, we have over 2,000 students engaged in research in our laboratories. They're all back doing that and getting engaged both on campus and in the world. So I think that's new too. And something that's really top of mind they're grateful for. And I think probably one of the best days as a Buckeye was we had the 2020 celebration in August for all the students who graduated in 2020, but didn't get to have an in-person graduation. I have never seen so many happy, students, parents, faculty, just to be celebrating. Wow, we made it, we graduated, and we got our degree, our certificate. So, the Buckeyes, what I've learned about the Buckeye Nation in the last year is they are resilient. They are passionate. I mean, you go anywhere in the world and you say OH, you're going to get a resounding IO from somebody. And, I've learned talking to the faculty and staff that they are a very impressive group of scholars, and that our students are smart and curious and kind, which is a pretty formidable combination. So I'm still learning. But I think, really top of mind is that the students, they're pretty passionate. They're passionate about social change. They're passionate about making a difference in the world. And, that's kind of some of the things I hear.
Go ahead, Bridget.
Well, so I just wanted to, I saw in the last little bit ago that you had announced a new $20 million investment in campus public safety. And that's something I haven't seen from other institutional leaders. So I just wanted to give you a chance to share a bit about your thinking behind that.
Right. Well, safety of our students is my number one priority. And I've always felt that if you don't feel safe, it's kind of difficult to learn. And that also goes for our students, for our faculty and staff. So we announced a number of initiatives in addition to the financial investment. We announced an expansion of our free Lyft ride to get students off campus back to on campus, or off campus to where they live safely. We are expanding the lighting in our surrounding neighborhoods. We're expanding the camera systems that we have deployed. And, this is an area that's quite close to our campus, so we want to have our students feel safe going into the community and then coming back. We're also expanding our security. Of course, that is the Columbus Police Department jurisdiction, but we have a joint program with the Columbus Police Department, and we have a very good working relationship with the Chief Elaine Bryant, who's the new Chief of Police in Columbus, Mayor Ginther, and also our community leaders. We recognize this is a holistic approach to public safety. It's not just about the security. It's also about trying to get at the fundamental roots of the increased crime. And in particular, and I know you know this, the gun violence has increased over 50% during the pandemic nationwide. And I just read in the New York Times today that the murder rate is the largest it's ever been, 2019 to 2020, since history was recorded of these acts in the 60s. So this is a nationwide problem. This is something that we need to address as a society. And it has multiple approaches and multiple measures of success. The investment, just to set the stage on that, we right now invest about $23 million in the university, another $7 million in the Wexner Medical Center. So we're investing about $30 million a year. And we're going to invest a minimum of an additional $2 million in order to enhance lighting, surveillance, free Lyft rides, and private security in and around our neighborhoods. We'll keep at it until we, in the short term, address this issue, and in the long term, address this issue through some of the community. We just announced this week, it was a project I'm really excited about, which is called STEAM Rising. This is science, technology, engineering, arts, medicine, and math. And it's in conjunction with the Columbus City School District and a wonderful Superintendent Talisha Dixon, as well as the mayor, as well as the president, David Harrison of Columbus State Community College. And it's a pathway for our students as young as in the 2nd and 3rd grade to experience a tremendous career that knowledge of STEM and STEAM allows. They say that the degrees in STEAM on average are about $90,000, which is about double those in non-STEAM careers. So we want to make sure that those opportunities are open to everyone. And that's the point of the land grant mission. So I would say I'm very passionate about public safety. I'm very passionate about keeping our students safe. And I will continue to do this until we solve this matter.
That's great. And I know it's also an extra challenge, especially being in a city where the majority of the issues that are being experienced are actually in the jurisdiction of the mayor's office or in the city. And it's a lot of partnership, a lot of collaboration, and trying to figure out. And as someone who lives in downtown Portland, Oregon, I mean, this is a challenge across the country. This is not specific to Columbus. So, Doug.
Yes, speaking of investments, you've also made some major investments in addition to other initiatives on diversity, particularly interested in the faculty hiring initiatives that you've announced in the last year. Why there's obviously some cultural and societal reasons why this is so timely. But why is it? Talk to us a little bit about that, and tell us why this is such an important issue for Ohio State and for you.
Right. So, one of the things that I've learned, which is a wonderful thing, is just, again, as I said before, how outstanding our faculty are. But what I noticed was over the last decade, we've actually increased the number of students at Ohio State by about 6,000, while we've decreased the number of tenure track faculty by 220. So if you look at, I set a goal of us hiring 350 tenure track faculty in this decade net. So we already hire over 100 every year, but we need to increase that in order to get our student faculty ratio lower, because we know that the science of learning, that you learn better when you have fewer students, more faculty. So that's the primary initiative in academic excellence, is around hiring at least a minimum of 350 tenure track faculty. And they will be in fields that are high demand right now, where we are seeing tremendous demand in business and engineering. But they'll also be in places where if you're a full-fledged, fulsome university, you have to have the arts and literature and social sciences and areas and humanities that maybe haven't been as popular lately, but they're fundamental to what it means to be a great university. I've always said the measure of a great university is the quality of the faculty. So we'll start with the faculty, and we will invest to hire them, because at the end of the day, they're the individuals that educate the next generation. So that's critically important. Within that, we also recognize, and sometimes people say there are multiple pandemics going on. One is, I think, the awakening or the reawakening since the George Floyd murder really is around racism in our society. And so we've announced the RAISE initiative, which is Race, Inclusion, and Social Equity, which has 6 pillars. We'll be looking to hire faculty whose scholarship is in education, particularly focused on STEAM, right? It's in healthcare disparities, it's in economics, and it's access to leadership and natural resources. It's the arts, and it's public safety. So the RAISE initiative, with these 6 pillars, we're aiming to hire at least 50 researchers in those areas, so that we can get at some of the systemic issues of racism and social justice in our society, and the need for that.
I do want to share. So I sit in a space where I frequently am observing and listening to, what the statements from presidents across the country are. And one thing I noted was that you were the first large public research university president who actually came out really directly to talk about Black Lives Matter and actually said the words. I found a lot of presidents were uncomfortable at first being able to talk about these issues around race and equity, but it struck me as very different, just how direct you were, and how the way that you framed it was really kind of leading the sector. And I saw other institutional leaders trying to kind of not cut and paste, but borrow from some of your courage. So I don't know if you know that, but you were one of the first, and it was some of the most forthright language I'd seen, especially from public research universities.
Well, thank you for that. We are a land-grant university, and I think the mission of the land-grant university is to serve those we influence in the communities in which they live. And, I mentioned earlier that I went to college in the 70s. I had wonderful professors, beautiful university that I had the honor and pleasure to attend, but I never once had a woman faculty member in the sciences. And I took all the math, all the physics, all the chemistry, all the engineering I could take ever in 8 years, undergraduate or graduate. So I recognized, so what did that mean to me? It's kind of crazy now that I'm university president. I didn't know women were faculty members in the sciences and engineering. And I was getting a PhD, so it wasn't like I was, totally ignorant. I mean, I obviously had some smarts, but it's so subtle. The inherent biases that we all have are just so subtle that it just never occurred to me until, and Ronnie Green's a very dear friend of mine, chancellor at University of Nebraska. Actually, University of Nebraska recruited me for a faculty position. Now, Ronnie, obviously you weren't at the time on the faculty, but that opened my eyes, and it was really the public institutions that came out recruiting. I then had an offer from Iowa and UC San Diego, and that said a lot. And then I realized, okay, I guess women were So you can imagine that that's really personal. That's where it comes, in part, it comes from my family, it comes from my grandfather. I'll tell you one little story and just quickly, but my grandfather worked for George Westinghouse himself in Westinghouse, the turn of the last century. And he created these things called casino schools. And I kind of wondered what that was growing up. And I asked, mom and dad, I said, what are casino schools? I mean, was he teaching people to gamble? They said, no. It was a restaurant in Pittsburgh, casino restaurant. But at night, he would rent the upper floor and he would hold classes, engineering technical classes, so that underrepresented minorities, mainly African Americans and women living in Pittsburgh, working for Westinghouse, could do something different than be janitors or serving tea. That's what I was told. And I did find on his death a letter that was written to him by the NAACP and the African American workers at Westinghouse as a resolution to his widow, my grandmother, applauding him for exactly this work. So I do think it's somewhere in the DNA.
That's great. That's a super helpful perspective. Doug, did you want to? Oh, you're muted again.
I'm trying to, there's some noise in the background, so I've been trying to limit it. I guess I'm interested in the how it's been shifting to, you were at, I think it's not even arguable, the largest, certainly, institution in terms of number of institutions system in the country, at SUNY, to a state where there isn't a ton of, there's obviously some statewide organization, but the institutions are generally free agents to a large extent, and Ohio State's the big kahuna in the state. So I'm just curious how that changes your view of collaboration with other institutions. Being on the, again, you don't have a system head per se in this quite the same way that you were that chancellor in New York. I'm just curious how you view how that affects your view of being a leader of a university.
It's interesting. I love my time at SUNY and being chancellor. And one of the first things that when I came in that I did was I sent to all 64 presidents, because they really, they own that campus and everything that goes on in it. I sent them a little book called Spider and the Starfish. And I know Ari Brofman, and I forget the other author, which basically talks about resilient organizations and how they're structured. Should they be centralized? Should they be decentralized? And it's really chapter 7, which I think is still needing to be fully written, that talks about the best systems are hybrid, where you have some activities that are centralized, but you also have a lot of activities that are decentralized and happen clearly at the campuses. We had extraordinary president leaders, and we really found that out when the pandemic hit. Coming to Ohio State, what I missed, though, as chancellor, was that I didn't have students. And even though there were 30,000 faculty, they were faculty that were doing great work on the campus. And so if I wanted to do a special project or see an opportunity to make change, I was just a layer or two removed from being able to really effectuate that change. So, and when I came to the Ohio State University, and especially after the students returned and getting to meet the faculty, I realized that that's really where my heart is. And I'm going to teach a class next semester, one on energy and clean energy, reducing our carbon footprint, all the different ways to do that. I'll co-team it with a professor. I won't name the professor since I haven't fully invited him yet to the to the gig. So, but I'm really excited about that, to be back in the classroom and really working closely with students.
Well, what an opportunity to have a former undersecretary be your teacher for a class on energy. So I want to shift to rapid fire, which these are the questions that our viewers really appreciate and write in about. The first question I want to ask is, what's the best advice that someone else gave you that has served you in your career?
Oh, that's easy. It was actually the advice I got from Gordon Gee, who's, two-time president of the Ohio State University and now president at West Virginia University. And the thing he said to me was, ask for help. It's too big, complex, difficult job to do by yourself. And people find it endearing. And it's true. Think about it. Anytime someone calls you and says, hey, I need some help, you kind of feel like, wow, I have something to offer. That's really great. And it's been so true. And I ask everybody for help. And that's when you talked earlier, Doug and Bridget, about partnerships and about some of the biggest problems that we have. They cut across disciplines. They are at the boundary of disciplines. They're at the boundary of organizations, right? And so that's why, whether it's public safety or academic excellence or a research partnership in the innovation district where we're bringing our community in, it's all about partnerships. So that's one way to build that partnership.
Wonderful. So the second one is, what advice do you find yourself most frequently giving to others who are interested in leadership?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think some of the advice that I give to our students is about being servant leaders. And what does that mean? That means really serving the people that you wish to lead, making the decisions they're in their best interest and not yours, and serving the whole as opposed to just the individual. I often said, Doug, going back to SUNY for a minute, I often said, and it's true at Ohio State too, the whole needs to be greater than the sum of the parts. You're really going to solve these complicated problems of the boundary disciplines. It really requires everyone coming together. But the parts have to be better for being part of the whole. So it's not good enough just to have the whole perspective. You also need to have the perspective as you come to the table as an individual leader. And I think my background as both the dean and a provost helped me appreciate that as well. So I think that's part of it, as servant leader. And the other thing I tell our students is make room in your suitcase. This is something a friend said to me once. I'll never forget it. When you leave the institution of Ohio State, you're joining an alumni of 600,000 strong. Well, make room in your suitcase for these kids, your roommates, the kids that were, on whatever outside one of our 1,400 student clubs, or the sports teams, or the musical or the dance. Because those are going to be your friends for life. They're going to be people that will be with you during thick and thin. I'm still in great contact with my dear friends from my Stanford days, and I wouldn't have it any other way.
That's wonderful. Well, I think that's perfect for us to end on. And thank you so much, President Johnson. It's really been an honor to have this conversation with you. I know that you're an incredibly busy person who is leading and supporting a massive institution that is in a very difficult time in a country, let alone for the state and the community you're in. So thank you for this time. And Doug, as always, you are an excellent co-host. So folks, we will see you all in 2 weeks. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Bridget.